Welcome to basically everything you need to know about protein and ADHD in 5 minutes. We're going to be going over why protein is important for ADHD, how dopamine and serotonin are created, nutrients you need to make protein turn into those brain chemicals, optimal amounts of protein for ADHD, and then also where to get that protein. So if you're new here, hey, I'm Annika. I'm an ADHD nutrition research expert and science communicator. I help people know what the research says about ADHD nutrition and then how to actually apply this to our lives. Because even though food's not going to heal us, it is going to help us. Now let's talk about protein. Protein is actually the raw material we use to create our neurotransmitters. Specifically, the ones that we care about here are dopamine and serotonin. If you've heard a lot about dopamine, you probably have because you have ADHD, but serotonin is also really connected to ADHD as well. When we consume it, it breaks down into something called amino acids. And the amino acids are the things that are actually the building blocks to our dopamine, our serotonin. So when we're not getting enough protein, it could actually make us not have enough of those neurotransmitters. Now, obviously that's going to take a while, but I'm not going to talk about protein depletion here. What I'm really talking about is protein optimization. Because when we don't have enough of the building blocks to create our neurotransmitters, we're not going to have optimal functioning, and I know that's what you care about. Dopamine is created through a specific amino acid called tyrosine. Phenylalanine is another amino acid that can actually create tyrosine, which, yeah, that's actually in our aspartame. If you're curious about the aspartame part, I do have a video on that too, so you can go check that out. Now, to create dopamine, it goes from tyrosine to something called L-dopa, and then it turns into dopamine. That's actually why your medication that's focusing on norepinephrine is there, because it's part of your dopamine pathway. Interesting stuff. Now, that whole conversion pathway needs a few things here. Obviously, it needs that protein, but it also needs B6, folate, which is B9, iron, and then also copper. And then to create serotonin, we need an amino acid called tryptophan. So tryptophan is converted to something called 5-HTP, and then that becomes serotonin. And then also, fun fact, it can turn into melatonin. That whole pathway is something really important for a lot of people with ADHD. Anyway, to convert into serotonin, we obviously need that protein again, but then we also need B6, magnesium, and vitamin C. So why do we need all those other nutrients to create it if we have the amino acid? Well, this is called a pathway to creation. For example, to create dopamine, there's some things called cofactors, enzymes, and all of them work together to create and convert the amino acid into that serotonin or that dopamine. For example, vitamin C is the one thing that actually helps convert the dopamine into norepinephrine, and then vitamin B6 is the one that actually turns the dopa into the dopamine. Really interesting, we see that most people with ADHD have lower levels of all these B vitamins that are incredibly important. It's really easy to remember B vitamins are really important for our brain, and most people just don't get enough of them. Really interestingly, people with ADHD tend to have low levels of brain iron. Also, really interestingly, methylphenidate has been studied to actually improve the levels of iron in both our bodies and our brains. That is connected to metabolism of our nutrients with ADHD, which I do need to talk about as well. For optimal guidelines of protein for ADHD, we actually have dysregulated metabolism of protein, interestingly also. That will be in a later episode where I get deeper into all this research. That being said, our ideal range here is 1.2 grams to 1.6 grams of protein per day per kilogram of your body weight. Now, if you're trying to lose weight or if you're trying to gain weight, it'd be more of that ideal weight instead. The minimum is 0.7 grams per kilogram of body weight, so at least just start and hit that first, and then you can make changes and improve later on. So now finally, let's talk about where we can find this protein. I do want to say if you're vegan or vegetarian, it is possible to get enough protein. It's just harder. The really interesting thing when we look at the research is that when we have at least 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight a day, the differences between the plant protein and the animal protein is pretty much negligible, specifically when we're looking at muscle mass and improving that. So if you are eating plant-based proteins, I would recommend erring closer to the 1.6, but if you're eating more of a pescatarian or omnivorous diet, then that 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram range is probably fine. Some really important proteins here are lentils and generally beans. Beans are honestly one of the best foods you can eat if you have ADHD. Oh my goodness, beans, the magical fruit. It's true, it is a magical fruit. Is it a fruit? It's a legume. Anyway, you can get protein from pretty much anywhere, even broccoli. It's gonna be easier to get your protein from animal sources, but you can do it without that. So just a quick recap, protein is super important for ADHD, not just because it's important to eat, but it's actually because it creates our neurochemicals that are very important for managing our symptoms. If we're not eating enough protein, we are not actually getting the symptom relief that we could be having otherwise. And that's why I love protein. I also kind of hate protein because it's really annoying to eat. Some of the best advice I've ever gotten was to practice eating protein in the morning because that is when we just typically don't eat protein anyway. So for me, I usually have a protein shake, and it is totally fine to use protein powder. And then the nutrients that we need to turn protein into those brain chemicals, there's a lot of them, but the main ones here again are all those B vitamins, so B6, B9, B12, iron, magnesium, zinc, copper, vitamin C. Those are some of the most important ones. And then last, again, our optimal guidelines are 1.2 grams to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight per day. Work slowly, you'll get there. Now, if you want to make sure you can put this into practice pretty easily, I do have a guide that is the ADHD diet. It is a completely science-backed document that goes through exactly what to do to help your ADHD according to nutrition science. I'll have the link for that in the description below. And then if you struggle more with the actually eating part, because that's my issue, honestly, the eating part can suck sometimes, I do have a free document that goes through some behavioral strategies. It's the short version. You can get the longer version in my store. I'll have all of that linked below. And then if you're really curious about a deeper dive into the specific research with ADHD and protein, let me know, especially if there's a specific area you're curious about. Now make sure you're subscribed and you like this video to stay on top of ADHD nutrition research, and I will see you in the next one.